and then it takes you another one setting up for meetings. So, but
Here's the title, Moby Dick.
why not? Why not? We are live. We are live. We're joined this hour by Rick Lupert, who is a poet, a an author, a venue host of kind of a legendary venue back back in the day. I don't know if it's still going, but I don't know what's up to that. But I have fond memories of it, and so do many other people I've spoken to today. So Rick, before we get into all the things you're kind of known for, can we talk a little bit about how you got started? Can you talk about how you got into the wide and wonderful world of poetry?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. It's really cool to be here. I've caught a handful of these things that you are doing, and it's like insanely impressive that you have basically created a 24-hour a day television station in your room there. It's a heck of a lot of effort, and more power to you for doing it. It's awesome. Um, how did I start? Well, like in writing or at the venue or just in.
Well, yeah, let's start at the beginning. How did like, when did you start writing?
I guess I have a memory of writing a poem in third grade. Some poets came to my school in, where was it? Was that Syracuse, New York, I think? And they kind of like a poets in the school kind of program, and worked with us. And they took the poems that we wrote and they put them in this little anthology. And I have a distinct memory of writing a poem, like an acrostic poem called Pig. And it was just, pigs are very piggish, irregularly attached to mud. Gosh darn it, pigs are messy. And that was my first poem. And I think I took a break from poetry for a while. And when I was an adult, I discovered I was always writing down little things, like young adult, like 19 kind of thing. Writing down little bits, observations that I thought were funny or interesting, but I didn't know quite what they were. And for a while they started to get a little longer. And so I thought, I found in the LA Weekly there was a listing for an event at a place called the Iguana Cafe, which is another legendary, long defunct venue which existed for a handful of years, which fostered creativity and artists and poets, and many people came out of that. And they were running an event every week called the Poetry Circle, and the idea behind it was you would go there and you would read a poem to the other people in the circle, and they would critique it, and that's it, and then you'd move on. So not exactly an open mic, not exactly a workshop. They called it a poetry circle. And the similar, actually, now that I think about it, in structure to the Beyond Baroque Wednesday night workshop, which happens and has been happening for decades. And I thought, I'm going to go there with my ridiculous, stupid things, and I'm going to read them, and they're going to say, "Oh, no, 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 that's not poetry," and then I'll know, and then I can just move on to something else. And the things that I read that afternoon, they dug, and they were really supportive, and it began I think that was 1990, maybe. It began a journey in poetry, in particular in LA, which has expanded beyond that I've been pretty consistently involved with.
Yeah. So would you say that your witty observations that were artistically put together, that were not quite what you would describe as poems, would they might have qualified as, in retrospect, qualified as aphorisms?
As what?
Aphorisms.
Affluid?
Aphorisms.
Oh, aphorisms. Sorry. I'm just learning the English language, and what those words. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, when they were one or two line things, I suppose there's any number of categories that they could have fit into. What are the things that Ben Franklin was I forget what their label, that he was famous for saying all the time, short one line kinds of things. And I think maybe so, but I also think that, remember, at the time they started to get longer as well, so it wasn't just one or two line things. But if you kind of expand your idea of what a poem could be. Why can't a one line thing be a poem? Are you, you're familiar with Richard Brautigan by any chance?
No, no, no.
He was one of the last. They call him one of the last of the beat poets, though he's never really anthologized with them. He just kind of existed at towards the end of them and later. His couple of famous titles. I guess his most known title, if anyone has ever heard of anything, was Trout Fishing in America. But he's got a bunch of poems, and some of them are just one or two line observations. And this guy was doing this in the 70s, in early 80s. And it kind of reading his work, in addition to the encouragement I got when I actually showed up and read the stuff in front of other people, really kind of expanded my idea of what a poem could be. I write stuff of all kinds of lengths these days, but sometimes it all is based around one observation that I get out, or want to get out, I should say. So maybe aphorisms.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to interview Yahya Labiadi. Oh man, I'm his friend. I'm butchering his name. Is horrible. I should have said Yahya. But he actually has been labeled by some as the world's greatest living aphorist. And we described what aphorisms were, like that didn't sound like anything to me. So like so it sounded like these little sayings that you that you impose upon somebody that that usually boil down to you should have known better for one or another reason. Like you did this one thing thinking it would go one way, but it turned out another. And you should have known that would happen the entire time. Like that was kind of what these aphorisms kind of boiled down to.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, that's funny, and that's one. I mean, my stuff, the one line things are often a humorous observation, which isn't. You're not necessarily getting a lesson from per se. I get them a lot when I'm outside of my element. Like if I'm traveling somewhere. If you ever go, I mean, you travel a lot. I know for your poetry and stuff. And if you're ever in particular in another country or even in another city or whatever, you see signs, you see the way things are labeled, you see products that you've never heard of before, or even just a local example in LA. If you've ever been to Travel Town, which is a kids park in Griffith Park that has a bunch of old trains, like really like full size steam engine trains that kids can climb in and stuff like that. And on the back of these trains, on every one of them, it's stenciled the words "no humping." And so it's if so, I guess and I still don't. I've never even looked this up now that I think about it. But I remember I was actually there. I was a camp counselor, and we brought our day camp to this park. And then there's these signs saying "no humping." Rick, what does that mean? So it's I guess there's some kind of system in which two trains connect to each other, and there's a correct way to do it and an incorrect way to do it. And the incorrect way is humping. But humping, as you may know, has other connotations. So this is kind of the way that I see these things which are normal in some contexts, but when I see them, because I'm not, that context is not my norm or my usual, it's becomes this spectacular observation or world, at least in my mind. And so I try to, when I'm doing these short little things, a lot of people describe me as a short little thing. That's the sensibility that it comes from.
Yeah, yeah. Being out of context, I would say that yes, much of what you like. If I had to like describe, if someone was like, tell me about the poetry of Rick Lupert, I would think like I would play. You can call me Al, and I'd be like, it's kind of like this, but variations of this,
That is a hell of a compliment. I love Paul Simon, and I think he's one of the best songwriters that we have.
Yeah.
And that's a quirky song, in particular, remembering back to the video with Chevy Chase in it for some reason, and it's that's I'll take it. Thank you.
Yeah, no. Well, the reason I say that because he's like, man walks into the third world, like he doesn't know what's going on. He's like, there's angels in the architecture. Amen, hallelujah. It's kind of like a,
Yeah.
what you're describing is like kind of just like being kind of out of place, but being very whimsical about it. And I think that would describe a lot of what I would see in your work. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Um, I love Paul Simon. My current book of poems is called Hunka Hunka Howdy. It's all, most of my books are travel books, written over the course of a couple of weeks while on a vacation, and while my wife is nice enough to be patient while I write down every single thing that I think is important to write down and remember on these trips. And this book was written while 2 summers ago, we went to Memphis, Nashville, and Louisville. And in Memphis, one of the big things to see, and what we went to on our first full day in Memphis, is Graceland, where Elvis, of course, lived and made his home. And Paul Simon's song, on the same album as "You Can Call Me Al" on the Graceland album, was just running through my head, the whole time. I wasn't really a big Elvis fan, but if you're in Memphis as a tourist, you better go check out Graceland. You know what I'm saying? And no one can doubt the influence that the man had on music. But it just, my frame of reference, besides, well, I know Elvis wrote some songs, but really my frame of reference was Paul Simon wrote a song about going to Graceland, and it just was in my head the whole time, on the plane to Memphis, on our Uber ride from the hotel to Graceland, up until we got there, when pretty quickly Elvis's music took over and became the soundtrack of the day there.
yeah. That sounds like about like him like reuniting with his son or something, isn't it? Like it's a trip to Graceland,
Reuniting with,
like an estranged like son or something like that, or like his like little boy. He's like like traveling companions. Yeah, anyway, son.
oh yeah, I mean what you mean, the story behind Paul Simon's song?
Yeah,
I remember. I don't remember the impetus of it. I remember it was definitely based on him driving from New York City to Graceland, and a lot of what happens, the Mississippi Delta is shining like, it's just he's kind of writing down the poetry of what he's seeing, So yeah, I don't remember if it's about an estranged son or not, but could be.
yeah. Good stuff. Anyhow, on to your work. What did going to Graceland? Do you have any poetry you can share with us right now?
Let me grab my book.
Okay.
Wait, observe this monkey. I'll be 5 seconds.
Okay. So earlier we were using a different app, and Rick was appearing in slow motion, and it was quite an affect, but that would have got old. All right.
Yeah, this is my book. It's called Hunka Hunka Howdy. Oh, I think I'm in reverse. I'm going to switch that because I want you to. There you go.
Whoa! How'd you do that? That was incredible.
It's
I thought the book was upside down. That was
I have powers.
yeah. But the monkey's fine. How did you like? All right.
Well, if you must know, there's for anyone who does Zoom things, which these days is everyone. There's a way you can, most webcams on laptops, at least on iMacs at any rate, are not really that great. And so there's a third-party program that lets you use your iPhone or your phone's camera as a webcam. You just connect it to your laptop with this cable. You download this program, and then you'd have to do an extra bit of something in Zoom to make it work. And then you can use your much better iPhone camera to do this. And then with an iPhone camera, just like you've got a front and back camera, you can switch the video to left and right. You can do, if you're just going on Facebook Live with your camera, you can do the same thing. There's a button somewhere which lets you reverse your camera so people see you the way you actually are and not in the mirrorverse, as it were. I think I began with that with "if you must know," and I still don't know if you must have known that. If that was a requirement of your thing. This is called "The Mississippi Delta is Shining Like a National Guitar."
The whole Graceland thing was an accident. That was not intentional. But
It's okay.
It worked out well.
It's relevant in my poems,
Let's go.
there are no accidents. And again, it's a hell of a compliment. Paul Simon, I think, is one of the greatest artists of our time. So, the Mississippi Delta is shining like a national guitar. I've never woken up in Memphis before, and already there's a hangover of sorts. I'm going to need the day to flush out Los Angeles. First on the docket is buying a postcard with a picture of ducks on it. Second, breakfast at a place that chases the sun. The amount of humidity is fist fighting with the available oxygen, and we're putting on all the loose clothing. We're detaching our hair from our heads. We've got biscuits in our future. Addie just wants to rock and roll all night, which is a hell of a thing to see this early in the morning. We are going to Graceland.
Okay. Cool. That's great.
Thank you.
So Rick, can you tell us a little bit about your I took notes and I just wrote that was cool and underlined it. I,
It's a good
I was
note.
looking at my notes. I'm like,
A good
I'll
note.
return to that later.
You can
Um,
refer to that later.
I will. So tell me about so I want to get to the conversations part where the question of the cobalt has come up several times in the stories of several poets. How did you come to host over at the Cobalt?
So I think in 92 or 93, one of the very first open readings I attended was the Cobalt Cafe, which at the time was not in the location that most people know of. It was of it having been in, which was the Sherman Way location. It was at a much smaller place on Ventura Boulevard in Woodland Hills, and tiny little place, just a few tables, like not even a stage in the front. Just you moved a table out of the way, and he put a microphone up. Just a tiny little coffee house. And as happens with little places like that, and big landlords, they wanted to make way for a bigger tenant. I think a nearby Italian restaurant wanted to expand into the space, and so the venue closed. And it was a sad thing. And a few months went by, and the owner of the Cobalt, a guy named Dave Politi, um, he took over the space of another coffee house slash bookstore, which used to be called the Storyteller, which is on Sherman Way, just what was on Sherman Way, just west of Topanga, in the place that became the Cobalt Cafe. And I have a vague memory of having gone to the Storyteller to see some music or something. Just one of the many many coffee houses that existed in the beginning of the coffee house renaissance. I like to think of it, which was going on in the 90s. So the venue, the Cobalt Cafe, opened just as you remember it in January of 1994, the weekend of the Northridge earthquake. And there was a big event on a Friday night. A band named Digga Jigga was playing, and who was really popular from the previous venue, and they were really cool. And it was so exciting. It was just so beautiful to be there. And then that Sunday night or Monday morning, the earthquake happened, and all the windows shattered, and it was crazy. I thought, oh great, we just got the Cobalt back, and now it's destroyed. But sure enough, that Tuesday night, the first of the open readings happened in that space. They were hosted by a guy named Steve. Steve was a funny guy. He was an entertaining host. I'm not sure he was a poet or even all that interested in poetry. He was really interested in hosting an open mic, and he did a good job of it. But he would bring like Justine Bateman's book of poems, to read from, to kind of just sort of make fun of it. And he introduced the group poem, which you might remember from when you were there, where people add a line and pass it on to the next person, and all kinds of stuff. And maybe a month or so into it being at the new space, he just kind of announced, guys, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I don't know what got into me, but I just went up to the owner and I said, Dave, are you looking for a new host? And he said, yeah, are you interested? And I said, sure. And he said, all right, you're the guy. And so that was my interview. I'd never hosted anything before. And I took it over and did it for almost 21 years until the venue closed at the end of 2014.
Well,
And
I'm terrible at math. What year did you take over in?
94. Yeah. It could have been February or March. I'm not sure. And that was almost 21 years. Would have been 21 years if it had gone a couple more months. But the venue, the guy, he couldn't afford to maintain it anymore. When 2014 rolled around, he had some health issues. His business model wasn't working anymore for him, and so he let it go. And I don't know if you know, I started it up about 8 weeks ago as a Zoom reading. People asked when the venue closed, are you going to start a new reading? What are you going to do? And I didn't do it I didn't do it, period, because I just felt, I had so much freedom at the Cobalt. I had proprietary control over the venue, which wasn't like a power trip. It was more about, I can do this reading any way I want, and the owner has complete trust in me. Eventually he couldn't afford to hire someone to be behind the counter, so he said, Rick, here's the key. You sell the drinks and do the reading, and then lock up when you're done. And it went that way for years. So just have someone in that great space have that much trust in you, without any kind of, espresso machine noise or anyone saying, you really shouldn't have someone reading poems like that, or whatever it was like such a gift. And in terms of going to another venue when it closed, I just thought, well, how do I convince someone, hi, I'm Rick Lupert, you don't know me, but you should let me do a reading at your place and let me do whatever I want, because I know exactly what, I just never kind of was able to, to get the cojones to figure out where and what to do that. And also I was tired, had done it for so long. It was kind of nice to have a break from doing that every week. And over the time that I hosted it, I grew up a lot. I got a wife, I got a child, I got a house, so it was really easy to not do it after a while. But then about 2 months ago, Christian Elder, who was one of the regulars at the Cobalt when I first started attending, before I was a participant, he said, right when the quarantine started, he said, we should do another group poem. Let's send an email out to the Cobalt list, get people to do it, and we'll get them to video their things. And if you remember the group poem, of course, that was like a terrible idea to do that. So naturally we did it. I mean, the group poem was never a good poem. It was often really funny to read, to see what people came up with and to try to interpret the handwriting and all that kind of stuff. But it was never a good poem. I think the best we ever got out of a group poem was well, that wasn't all that bad. But this poem that these 35 people wrote over the a month ago was really good. And Christian put a video together with everyone reading their own lines, and it's up on the Cobalt Poets Facebook page if anyone wants to check it out. And because he had the idea to do that, I thought, wow, what's stopping me from bringing the Cobalt back as a Zoom reading? And I did, and we just had the 8th one. What's today? Thursday, 2 days ago. We're making broadsides for the poets again, and it very much has the spirit of the reading, and people can participate without having to drive to Canoga Park.
Well, tell us about these broadsides that you developed. When did you start doing that?
I started doing those, I think, at the beginning of 2003, and every venue has attendance highs and lows, and after a while, that we didn't have featured readers when I took over the Cobalt, and not much changed about the reading between when I took it over in 94 till 2003. And between the middle of 2003 and the end of that year, that's when I met my wife. She was living in Kansas City, and I was really focusing on her and visiting her in Kansas City and spending as much time as I could with her and trying to get her to move to LA and all that kind of thing, and which all worked out spectacularly well, I should say. And when she moved in with me in December, I thought, I need to do something to rejuvenate what's going on at the Cobalt. So I decided I'm going to, well, I guess at the time for a few years that we were having featured readers on the one Tuesday a month, because a group called the Valley Contemporary Poets was presenting someone. And when we started doing that, there weren't broadsides at the time. When we started doing that, some of the regulars, actually one of the regulars, a really loud regular, said, "Oh, you're bringing, who are these poets you're bringing in who are featured readers? You should be featuring us." And but it was like a whole thing, and so and the complaint didn't really last that long, and the weeks that we were having featured readers became the best attended events, And so I decided that starting in 2003, I was going to have a featured reader every week. I was going to continue to have the Valley Contemporary Poets present a featured reader, and then I was going to pick the other three. I eventually developed partnerships with some other groups. Rafael Alvarado's Hollywood Institute of Poetics, he presented a poet. I would occasionally ask individuals, "Hey, do you got someone you want to present?" And I thought, one of the great things, one of the cool things about being a featured reader is that sometimes they pass a hat, and you get a few bucks for having done a reading, which is, as a poet, sometimes it's the best you can hope for, in terms of making money from readings. I felt a little weird about passing the hat and just doing a straight up ask for money. I didn't have money to just give out to poets. And I remember Pat Cohee's Laguna Poets series, which went on for many years, where every single week he would publish a chapbook for the featured poet every single week. And he did hundreds of these. And I thought, okay, you know what? That's a shitload of work. There's no way I'm doing that. But I'm a graphic designer. I could make a broadside. I could make like a nice design for one poem for those people. So that's what I did. And the first person I asked to read on the very first featured reading that I did in early 2003, after my wife had safely moved in with me from Kansas City. So I knew I was good and I could do, focus on some other things a little bit. Was Brendan Constantine, who's one of my best friends, and I thought I'm gonna start off with a bang, and he's gonna be it, and made a broadside for him. We sold them for $1 each at the reading. Right, it was a minimum $1 donation. 100% of the money went to the poets. That sometimes people gave $1, sometimes people put down $20. They could sell their books too if they wanted. People would want them to sign them. They got a cool poster to take home. And that's how it started.
Yeah. That's
I think just as of now, there's now 427 of them as of Tuesday.
Rank them. Now. So what are some of the ones that really stand out in your mind, though? Like, I'm joking, obviously, but like, what are some of the ones that really are notable? I mean, when I ask you, think back on some of these broadsides. What are the first ones that come to mind?
Well, Brendan is always the first one that comes to mind because it was the first one I did. And I mean, there's some other cool ones. I had like Ben Ramirez and Ben Trigg and Steve Ramirez read together at the Cobalt, and I did like a double broadside. And of course, they host the Two Idiots Peddling Poetry reading at the Ugly Mug in Orange, and so I really kind of honed in on the idiots idea. And it was like I found a picture of two like naked guys running through the forest, and like I put one of those in the background of Ben's and one of those in the background of Steve's.
Yeah.
And you just see their asses, and each of them there's a poem on each one, and then you see them right next to each other. And so Steve and Ben, I remember they came into the Cobalt and looked at them, and I forget which one said, but one of them just said, "Your ass is nicer than mine." I remember.
Give them unequal asses, man.
I think it was Jaha Zainabu.
Oh yeah.
She had one, and I'd never met her before. I think she was one of the people that maybe someone else was presenting. That was another cool thing about the reading. I met so many poets, and I loved giving away the task of picking who's gonna feature to other people because I only know so many people, and having to have all these different voices to be able to connect with them and meet them because they were brought into the Cobalt was cool. And Jaha was one of those people, and I remember that she, having never met her, and or any of sometimes really knowing very well any of these people, you don't know how they're going to react to the imagery that I pick on the broadside. And that's another thing about him. As a graphic designer who works all day with people telling me I don't like that, do something different, or do this, or change that, destroying my beautiful designs that I've given them. Like one of the cool things about, and I'm happy to have that because it pays the bills. But one of the cool things about doing broadsides is it's all me. Like no one's telling me. There's no drafts. There's no nothing. It's just I do what I want to do, and I hope to God that people like it. For the most part, that's what's happened. So I don't know whether they're going to like them. I don't know if they feel that the imagery I chose is going to connect with their poems. And I remember, I think it was Jaha came in and looked and said, "Wow, who are you? This is like so perfect." The imagery just really suited her whole vibe and what she was about. And so, it's stuff like that stick out of my mind. In terms of not so much like which one do I like best because I think the design is coolest, but just in terms of the way that people reacted and connected to them.
Do you ever think about getting involved in like making like book designs and like book covers and stuff?
Well, yes, because I actually do a lot of that. I mean, I designed this cover, for example.
You're froze right now. I can't actually see you, but like we've had so many technical difficulties.
I'm frozen.
Yeah, you're froze. You're like this. You look very contemplative.
Oh
I
man.
told you earlier. All right, let's see the book. Yeah, you're good. You're good now. Let's see.
Okay. You should have mentioned it earlier. Sorry. Yeah, I just restarted the camera. This is the. This is the. So I was just like this the whole time.
No, you look better than that. You look like a Bell and Sebastian album cover.
Like the end of like an airport movie in Airplane, Leslie Nielsen, where they all like pretend that they're frozen while the credits read over them, but then someone blinks.
Yeah, well, kind of, but you got a little monkey in the back, so kind of like a Wes Anderson film.
That's a Brendan Constantine painting, by the way. So
Charming.
this is the book that I designed. I mean, I designed this cover. I think I've designed all of my book covers, as a matter of fact, and I've done a lot of book design cover for other people and layout. And so yeah, I not only do I think of doing it, I think of doing it all the time.
Very cool, very cool. No, that's it's cool to have multiple talents. I wish I had more. But yeah. So has anyone ever actually been have you ever? I mean, you don't have to name who it was, but just have there ever been any like broadside controversies?
I don't think there's been a broadside controversy. I think the worst that's happened is there's a typo or something, or I misspelled someone's name, or that kind of thing. In which case I went home, fixed it, made sure I uploaded the right one to the Cobalt Poets website, and I reprinted them and sent them to the poets so they would have a good copy of it. But I don't think no one, at least to me, has complained about their broadside. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you missed the mark or blah blah blah. No, so it's possible that there's someone out there who hated it and thought that it was stupid or whatever. But not that they kept it from me.
Yeah. So there's a question from the audience. Rick, what do you feel travel poetry tells the audience or the residents of the place you write about?
That's a really good question. Someone, a lot of, as we talked about earlier, a lot of my poetry is kind of humorous observations. And if you're writing those kind of humorous observations in a place that's not your place, you run the risk of, and someone made this observation to me early on in my career, are you just making fun of these places that you're going to? So it's not my intention to do that. I think with the humorous stuff, it's just more pointing out how we all perceive things differently, and it hopefully comes out humorous and more having fun, I suppose. Um, I think, I mean, to me, these books are really travelogues. They really document my experience of being in this place. So it's, if you want to kind of put yourself in the shoes of what it's like to be in a particular place that I was in, reading one of these books will give you a really good experience about what is there, what there is to see, what there is to eat, what are the peculiarities of the place, what's different about the place, or maybe funny about the place that we don't have elsewhere. What are the emotional struggles of the place, to some extent? What's the poverty of the place? So my poetry is a lot of the travel poetry in particular is a lot about both learning what the place is about for my own experience and trying to communicate what it is that I've learned and seen in the poems.
So it's like a Talking Heads album.
I don't know that I've ever listened to an entire Talking Heads album, so I'm gonna have to take your word for that.
Yeah, no, it's always like I'm in a city. Like look at the, like I buy the juice down the stairs. I don't know. It's I don't know. I'm just I'm just referencing the things I know that are
That's cool, man. No judgment.
in the park.
I have much respect to David Byrne and the Talking Heads. Absolutely. I've been actually kind of.
I'm guessing a shared frame of reference based on the painting behind you. That's all I'm really attempting to do.
I may go listen to their entire catalog when we're done.
Next time I'll be prepared. Won't leave me hanging like that. But I did leave you frozen for like 10 minutes.
Why the big suit? Isn't that a talking?
Yes, yeah. Why the and this is not my beautiful wife.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
David Byrne was on Saturday Night Live not too long ago doing some of those songs after kind of being out of the public eye for a long time, and he was amazing, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on here. Can you share with us another poem?
Sure. Let's see. Let's find a good one. There's only 4 good ones in this book, so it's a little tough. This was
bookmark them.
I should. Or just print a copy for myself, which only has 4 pages, so I can get right to them. So
there's a chapbook inside.
I should at least provide notes for, if people buy the book, just like a little card. Only read pages 4, 38, and 124. The rest is crap. This is a poem called What I Saw. It's written also in Memphis at the end of the second day. One of the other big things to see in Memphis is the National Civil Rights Museum, which is a museum of civil rights that was built adjacent to and including the Lorraine Motel where Martin Luther King was assassinated. And part of the museum is seeing like the actual room where it happened, and then another part of it is going to the building across the nearby where the shooter was and that kind of thing. So that's only one observation in this poem, but this was written at the end of that day, and it's called What I Saw. Today I saw the spot where Martin was shot and the spot where he was shot from. I saw a tunnel to a cellar where slaves crawled for their lives. I saw free men catapult themselves down Beale Street for nothing more than whatever I was willing to put in a bucket. I saw buckets. I saw rocks made of ice. I saw a $2 duck and kept it forever, unlike at the Absinthe Room where it was $2 just to walk into the room. I saw smiles and flowers and a piano that sang with no one's hands. I saw banjos from Africa, a bridge for human feet only that spanned the entire Mississippi. I saw a pyramid my ancestors had nothing to do with. I saw it all. I saw it all. That is the entire poem.
Yeah, no, I believe it. Um, this is what number collection is this? Most recently.
This is, I think this is 23. It's maybe 23 or 24. I kind of lose count because for on different places I started, I counted like an ebook once, and so I've lost count. I've got my next book written and designed. It's called The Tokyo Van Nuys Express. It was written last summer when Addie and I went to Japan, part of which was going to Hiroshima, which was a really cool experience. And that's either 24 or 25. It's somewhere around there. Again, not prepared.
I was unprepared to hear you have over 20 books. That
If it's easier, we can say it's less.
no, that's shocking to me. That's no, that's I would have conducted this. I mean, I would have conducted this interview completely differently. I would have been like, I probably would have been like kind of nervous. I mean, I have two. Like that's shameful for the rest of us, Rick.
Well, okay. I mean, it shouldn't be the. I mean, again, most of my books are travel books, which are written over this short period of time. So that's like 20 of them. You know what I'm saying? So it's in. And the first one I put out, my first book ever, Paris, It's the Cheese, was written over a 2-week trip in Paris in 1996, and when I had this whole little collection of poetry that I wrote there, and I thought, oh, I'm going to put this out, completely ignoring like the 6 years of poems that I've been writing and reading at open readings that have been published in places. It's a lot harder to take your body of work and like assemble an anthology over time. So in terms of like anthologies of poetry or collections of poetry, there's 2 or 3 of those.
All right. All right.
And then it was cheating putting out a travel book, but then I kept doing it just because it became my thing to do. So
Here we go. Here we go. I'm gonna ask you where these were written. All right. Paris, It's the Cheese. Where was that?
that was written in Paris, France.
I am my own Orange County. Where was that?
That's a trick title. That's my first anthology collection of poems, and that was based on the poem that was called that. In Orange County, the poets are more like heckly out in the audience. So I remember like we were at a reading once. I was reading this poem. The poem kind of critiques itself after. So it's like a poem within a poem, and then there was an Orange County poet in the audience, and I looked it up at him as I was critiquing myself or heckling myself, and I said, "See, I am my own Orange County," and that became the title of that book.
All right. Mowing Fargo.
Fargo, North Dakota.
I Am a Jew. Are You?
Collection of poems loosely based around the experience of being Jewish.
Stolen Mummies.
London.
What? Everyone knows there's werewolves in London. I'd like to bake your goods.
Well, everything in the British Museum is stuff that they stole from other places, including the mummies. So, I'd like to bake your goods that's the book I wrote on our honeymoon. We went to Paris, Rome, and Venice.
You wrote a book on your honeymoon? Come on, man. Okay, this is why. A man with no teeth serves breakfast. That sounds like it follows.
That was back in London again. It's a short book.
Yeah. It seems like there's a following theme here. We put things in our mouths.
I think that was the one written in Amsterdam, Brussels, and Bruges, and maybe Paris too.
You've been to Bruges?
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie?
I had seen the movie, and so, of course, just like going to Graceland, all I knew about Bruges was the movie. Bruges is a cool place to spend a day and a night. We were there for 2 nights. It was a little longer than we needed there, but it's a sweet little town. And there aren't, Colin, what's the actor's name?
Firth? No,
yeah.
No, that's not Colin Firth. Colin Farrell? No, Colin.
One of the Collins who was in
yeah, the one that was really famous.
Yeah, he was not there, so like that right away blew the whole,
Oh, great. Yeah.
my understanding of Bruges out of the water. I had to learn the whole city again.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know a guy named Scott Creeley who's a poet?
I do know him from connecting online. I don't know that not sure if I've met him in person. I
Doesn't
don't
he
know.
look like Ralph Fiennes?
Yes,
Yes. All right. Sinza Buckawood.
Sins of Buckwood. That's the Algonquin word for maple syrup that was written in Montreal, Canada.
It sounds like the sins of somebody named Buckawood. All right. Death of a Mauve Bat.
That was written in Toronto and Niagara Falls, and it comes from. We went to the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Culture, which is an ultra modern art museum, and there was a video playing in the museum by a Canadian group called Shut the Fuck Up. That was the name of the art collective, and they were trying to make a video about, well, what is art, and their whole thing was they were going to go to an art show and paint giant canvases using taxidermied poodles as their brushes. And to introduce that video, before the documentary part of them doing that, they put in a scene of the original Adam West Batman show in which the Joker, played by Cesar Romero, was in a live painting contest against the Batman, and he turned in a blank canvas and he called it "Death of a Mauve Bat." So that's where that title comes from.
Wow. You strung so many sentences together, each more puzzling than the next. The Lizard King of the Laundromat.
That was written in a laundromat that I went to 4 weeks in a row after I moved into a newly renovated apartment building that didn't have laundry machines yet.
Brendan Constantine is My Kind of Town.
That is a collection of poems written for or inspired by Brendan.
These are kind of interesting presses. Mauve Bat came off Ain't Got No Press, and this one's on Inevitable Press.
Ain't Got No Press is My Press, which is a play on. I don't know if you've seen the musical Hair, but there's a song in it where he's there, which is ain't got no this, ain't got no that, ain't got a bunch of destitute people. And so one of the lines is ain't got no prayer hair, and I said, oh, I'm gonna name. I'm no one's publishing me right now. I'm gonna start my own press and call it Ain't Got No Press. Inevitable Press was the press that Pat Cohey of the Laguna Poets published all those chapbooks every week on.
Yeah. All right. Feeding Holy Cats.
That was written in Israel,
Up Liberty's Skirt.
New York City.
The Gettysburg. Why? The Gettysburg Undress.
The Gettysburg Undress was written in Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, and maybe Baltimore, Maryland. Yeah, and I think we stopped at Gettysburg on the way to Washington, D.C.
Making Love to the 50-Foot Woman.
My second true anthology of poems out on Rothko Press, who are the people who did Caffeine magazine back in the 90s.
Professor Clown on Parade.
That was written in Burlington, Vermont, Maine, Portland, Maine, and Hartford, Connecticut, I think.
Romancing the Blarney Stone.
Ireland.
All right. Donut Famine. Was an album. No, Donut, that's a book. Donut Famine.
That was written in New Orleans, a city that I loved visiting.
Was there a donut shortage?
Well, we started the trip. Many of these trips started on the East Coast when we flew there to hang out with my relatives and leave our young son there for a week, while giving us the opportunity to travel. My wife and I. And so in Syracuse, New York, where we left our kid, at 4 o'clock in the morning, when we got on the plane to go to New Orleans, the Dunkin' Donuts announced that there weren't any donuts. It just felt, and it felt too early in the day for them to run out of donuts, and it just like they said, what do you mean there's no donuts? You're Dunkin' Donuts. And they just like, the truck never arrived. And so it's like, we're just like imagining like there's a tipped over donut truck somewhere. So famine of donuts at the beginning of that trip.
All right, you are froze again, so you might want to freeze yourself.
Oh.
I think that I'm not sure how long that's. I was looking at your website, reading off all your books, so that one wasn't my fault. Um, so last final question before I'm going to ask you for advice and warmth. Can you tell us what is the Lupert verse?
What is the Lupert verse?
I'm seeing this on this website. Is this not a good question?
Well, I do have, okay.
It says he also writes for the Jewish poetry blog from the Lupert verse.
From Lupers, yes. Okay, so there's a website called jewishjournal.com, and they're nice enough to host a weekly poem that I write, and the blog is called From the Lupert Verse. So there's a Jewish tradition of reading the Torah every week, and this is what happens on Saturdays at a temple, and you read a story from the Torah every single week, and you do that all year. And then the Torah ends, and you scroll it back up to the beginning, and then you read them all over again, like from the creation of the world through the end of the story of Moses arriving at the edge of the promised land. And so you read these stories every week, and they don't change. It's not like Noah, brings 5 animals on when you read it the next year. No, it's still 2 of every kind. So the challenge as a person, if you're choosing to participate, and especially the challenge, and I always say this when I read from my collected book of poems, because my book of God Wrestler is, I wrote a poem every single week after reading the Torah portion. The challenge is, A, what are you getting out of this every single year by doing this? And B, if you're someone like me who's not so much a believer, but more like, well, this is an interesting tradition that my ancestors have been doing for a long time. If I'm going to participate in it, why am I doing it? So that's sort of the challenge of why you're doing this. So when the Jewish Journal said, sure, we'll let you post your poem every week to our blog, which gave me a deadline every week to actually have to write one of these poems. So that's sort of what that is. So the first collection of those poems I wrote, one a week, is in this book, God Wrestler. And when that year ended, it turned out that you're supposed to do it again every single year. So I've been writing. This is the 4th or 5th year that I've written a poem every single week while reading that week's Torah portion and kind of responding to what's happening in it.
All right, so we have a question from the audience. Where can we find these books that we mentioned earlier?
They're all available on Amazon, amazon.com. If you look up my name, you'll find them all. If you go to my website, poetrysuperhighway.com, there are samples from all of the books, and then links to buy them as well if you want. And thank you for asking that.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, that's quite an impressive feat to have written so prolific. I think.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I don't know what to say. That's pretty incredible. Rick, I thank you so much for your time. We will drop the link below to the website and to things people can follow up with. And thank you for sharing. It's been a lot of people have been mentioning the cobalt. That's been a very, very important part of a lot of people's poetic journey. So thank you for all the work you've done over the decades. I really, you're a treasure to the community.
My pleasure. And if anyone is watching and wants to join in, the Cobalt Open Reading is still happening now via Zoom. poetrysuperhighway.com/cobalt. You can see for free all 427 broadsides, download the PDFs. You can see the schedule of who's reading, and there's links to the Zoom if you want to show up and read a poem yourself. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Rick.